Hello, and welcome to our fourth quarter strategy review. We met on Thursday, which was 1 week and 1 day after the big Fed announcement lowering interest rates 50 basis points, which came as a surprise to many people. That became a very large part of our meeting and affected our decisions greatly because we did feel that that was a strong, positive move to make. At our meeting, I was joined by Len Schill, the Vice President and CEO of the firm, Scott Schill, Director of Longevity Planning, and as we don't want to get too internal, we also had two guests, one of them, Dave Cooper, the other, Corey Owen, and we really appreciate their taking the time to share their views, because again, that's important to us to be able to have those views shared by others. Do want to mention that Bob Toomey has moved on to other things, and while we will miss him, we do wish him well in all of his future pursuits. As I said, we talked about interest rates, so what better time than to turn it over to Len to talk about our views and what we are doing in the debt markets.
Thank you, Stan. The Federal Reserve has a dual mandate: to keep inflation in check, they target around 2 to 3%, and to achieve maximum employment. The primary tool at their disposal for achieving these goals is their ability to set interest rates. They've been walking a line between trying to bring inflation down with higher interest rates while trying not to force the US economy into a recession by maintaining those rates too long to where they become too great a headwind for the economy. Last week, after a period of elevated interest rates, in the first interest rate cut since 2020, actually, the Fed lowered its benchmark rate by 50 basis points. Now, that cut is larger than many forecasters were anticipating, and it represents a shift in the Fed's thinking from fighting inflation to maintaining employment. It's almost certain to be followed by further cuts in the next several meetings. We share the Fed's confidence that inflation is largely under control. We also agree that they should be focusing on the employment side of their dual mandate. Since declining interest rates are a positive for bond prices, we've chosen to overweight our allocation in the fixed income area in anticipation of further cuts. We've also replaced the senior loan ETF, SRLN, which we've been using to supplement the intermediate term bond area, with a utilities ETF, XLU, which honestly we've used as a bond surrogate with success in the past. We don't see declining interest rates affecting senior loans to the extent that they will other intermediate term bonds in a positive way. And we expect also that utilities will have a more positive effect on the overall portfolio, particularly as AI growth increases the need for additional energy. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Stan to talk about changes in equities.
Thanks, Len. Our changes in equities actually were relatively small. Again, we do feel good about the Fed moves, and consequently, we continue to concentrate on things that would benefit from lower interest rates and higher dividends, hopefully. So net, we wound up increasing our exposure to REITs. REITs, of course, is something that I talk about all the time, and I'm always fairly positive. I'm very positive this quarter. Again, interest rates will continue to give you positive returns. Remember, REITs have to send out 95% of all the dividends they earn, and that is something that they do over time. But we also added to value in two ways: the cows, which is part of our mature equities, and the small stock, basically value fund. Both offer a bit more exposure to value-oriented and higher dividends. So with that, we also wound up keeping our natural resources intact. And overall, we are looking at, again, a relatively positive move for the others as well, including the international markets. However, the international markets, we are continuing to use the International High Yield Fund. So with that, I'd like to ask Scott if he would share with us some ideas on longevity planning.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Always a pleasure to talk about longevity and longevity planning. So longevity planning is about strengthening your plan with SR Schill and Associates. Yes, it involves adding the legal component where we can do wills and trusts and powers of attorneys and those types of things. But it's really about addressing the pieces of retirement that we don't speak to often, but that can really impact our retirement plan. So here's what I mean. As we grow up, those of us in the sandwich generation, we, over time, we have the role as, many of us have the role as parents, and we sort of learn by trial and error a little bit about doing that. And we also are people, and we're starting to plan for our future and our retirement, doing that well. But we're also still kids. We're adult kids. And as our parents are living longer, we don't really have any idea. We want to do everything right for our parents, but we have no idea how to do it. And so what we want to do with longevity planning, I'm going to give you one example, is, oh my gosh, if our parents need help, if there's a dementia diagnosis or they have a stroke, all of a sudden we're thrown into this mess and we don't know what to do. So what we do as part of our longevity planning is we want to help. So in that situation, if you're in the hospital and they're saying, what are you going to do? You say, I don't know how this system works. I just want to do the right thing for my parents. But I do know how to call, who to call. I know what my parents want. I think we've talked about that. And here's who I'm going to call. We got this special person who's going to come in, work with the hospital, figure out all the possibilities. And if it's viable to go home, which most of our parents want to do without being a burden on us, they'll put together the pieces to make that happen. And by doing that, we do two things. We really accomplish the goal of making things easier, and also a really challenging, difficult system for aging in America. We can make it work for us and our families. So give it a shot. Come in. Let us show you how we can really strengthen your future. And with that, I'll put it back to Stan.
Thanks, Scott. And I just want to point out that Scott is my son. And I don't know whether everybody knows, but I've had some difficulties with this. My wife is in memory care, and I will just tell you that those services and having that availability has been fantastic, and I really appreciate that. And by the way, most of our firm is family, and you're part of our family as well. So please, all of you, take advantage of that service. It's available to all of you, and it's part of the service. And we think it's a very important part of the financial planning services that we provide. With that, I would like to say that, of course, at these meetings, we always talk about triggers. And I just want to remind you that triggers are something that we identify at these meetings, because we don't want to have to be identifying what to do if something crazy happens. So we identify things that we don't think are going to happen, but if they do, then we've made a decision as to how we'll handle it. So the first triggers that we dealt with were similar to ones that we had before, which had to do basically with the concern of inflation. Now, inflation is coming down. As a matter of fact, our trigger last year, or last quarter, I should say, would have been pulled because inflation is getting very, very close to what the Fed is looking for at 2%. 2%, again, is a level that is still hard to achieve even from here. But we said if they can get there, that would be amazing. But we don't want to lose track of the fact that inflation just a couple of years ago is up over 9%. And we don't want to ignore if the Fed doesn't succeed. So we still have a trigger in there that says if we see rates going up at 0.85 in a month, that would be in excess of that number, then we would take a negative action at that point. The last trigger that we put in has to do with employment. This is the one area that the Fed seems to have the largest concern about. And when we've seen some of the volatility, it's been around those unemployment numbers. Again, unemployment is not serious at this point, but it is about 4.2%. And we said if it goes over 5, then we would take some action at that point in time. So with that, again, we're very, very pleased that you've joined us once again. I want to remind you that, and I'm a little surprised myself, that we've been doing this since 2013. More importantly, it is memorialized. It's on our website. If you want to see what we were saying back in 2013, feel free. It's out there and take advantage of it. And with that, I'd like to say thanks again for tuning in. And this, our 37th year in business, coming at next month, is going to be a big celebration. And I hope you all share in it and tune in next quarter.